Hi, everyone. So I think we should probably get started. I'm going to remove this holding slide. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here. My name is Josh Lubin-Levy. I'm a part-time lecturer in visual studies at Eugene Lang New School. And it's very much my pleasure to welcome you to this evening's program. Bill chats with renowned choreographer Bill T. Jones and associate professor Ricardo Montez, speaking both about Jones's collaborations with the artist Keith Haring and also what Professor Montez has called is in his recently published book, Keith Haring's Line. And I hope the conversation evolves from some of these questions about the work done with Haring to questions urgently about the kind of work being made today and the landscape of the performing arts that we're living in now. The conversation will be about 45 to 60 minutes. I'll step way out of the way in a minute, and it will be followed by Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to enter them through the Q&A function or in the chat, and I'll jump back in to read out the questions towards the end. This evening's program is part of Virtual Bodies, a series of public programs sponsored by the Department of the Arts at Eugene Lang College of Liberal Arts, the New School. The event is also co-produced by New York Live Arts. A profound thank you to Janet Wong, Associate Artistic Director of NYLA, and to Neil Greenberg, Chair of the Arts and Professor of Choreography at the New School, both of whom contributed immeasurably to making tonight's dialogue possible. Thank you as well to Rafael Munoz at the New School for being the backbone for all of our Virtual Bodies programs. And of course, a profound thank you is due to our two guests tonight, to whom I will turn over this virtual space in just a minute after I introduce them. Ricardo Montez is an associate professor of performance studies. His research examines the performance of race, ethnicity, and sexuality in visual culture and media. He received his PhD from the Department of Performance Studies at New York University, where he was also a faculty fellow in Latino studies. Additionally, he held the Kotzen postdoctoral fellowship in race and ethnicity studies in the Society of Fellows at Princeton University. His book, Keith Haring's Line, Race and the Performance of Desire, was recently published by Duke University Press. Bill T. Jones is artistic director, co-founder, and choreographer of Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Company, and artistic director of New York Live Arts. Mr. Jones choreographed and performed worldwide with his late partner Arnie Zane before forming the Bill T. Jones Arnie Zane Dance Company in 1982. He has created more than 140 works for his company. As the artistic director of New York Live Arts, he leads an organization that strives to create a robust framework in support of the nation's dance and movement-based artists through new approaches to producing, presenting, and educating. Jones is the associate artist of the 2020 Holland Festival and recipient of the 2014 Doris Duke Performing Artist Award, the 2013 National Medal of Arts, the 2010 Kennedy Center Honors, a 2010 Tony Award for Best Choreography for the critically acclaimed FELA, a 2007 Tony Award, 2007 Obie Award, and 2006 Stage Directors Award and Stage Directors and Choreographers Foundation CALLAWAY Award for his choreography for Spring Awakening. The 2010 Jacob's Pillow Dance Award, the 2007 USA Eileen Harris Norton Fellowship, the 2006 Lucille Lortel Award for Outstanding Choreography for the Seven, the 2005 Wexner Prize, the 2005 Samuel H. Scripps American Dance Festival Award for Lifetime Achievement, the 2005 Harlem Renaissance Award, the 2003 Dorothy and Lillian Gish Prize, and of course, the 1994 MacArthur Genius Award. In 2010, Mr. Jones was recognized as Officier de l'Ordre des Arts et des Lettres by the French government. And in 2000, the Dance Heritage Coalition named Mr. Jones an irreplaceable dance treasure. It is my absolute pleasure to turn this evening over to Bill T. Jones and Ricardo Montez.
So thank you, Josh, for organizing this evening, and a huge thank you, Bill, for doing this. I'm just so honored and so thrilled to be able to have this conversation with you. And I was thinking that I would say a few words maybe about my book. And how I came to choose the cover for my book, which you're on. And then we could maybe talk about that event and then move into other conversations about other work that you did with Keith Haring, if that sounds good. Yeah. Okay. So my book, Keith Haring's Line, Race and the Performance of Desire, just came out. And in my initial conversations with people about the book, various interviews, people keep asking me kind of to make some sort of judgment about whether Keith Haring was a good race artist or a bad appropriator. And something that I want to say is that's not at all any kind of claim or judgment that I care to make about Keith Haring. And in fact, I understand why people want that sort of answer from me, because I think we're in a time where people want really kind of programmatic responses to dealing with the complexities of race and the complexities of desire. But my book really resists, I understand I perform a racial critique according to sort of theories in academia, but the analysis is really about the inability of those kinds of criticisms to capture what's actually going on when we talk about race and we talk about desire. The other thing about my book is that it's a real love letter to Keith Haring. So I mean, there's something almost creepy about my obsession with the artist and my own desire to get to know him, to kind of uncover him in the archive. And so part of my methodology is very much about addressing my own projections and my own desires and how I make meaning of archival materials. I make meaning of his journal entries through my own, what I bring to bear on them, through my own feeling responses to these materials. So it's not, it doesn't claim to be like a more correct version of Haring's life, uncovering some truth about racial politics that nobody's yet addressed. I don't have any interest in doing that. But what I do want to do is think about the line. For me, the line tells a race story, but it's a race story that's very dynamic and kind of, it's unable to contain within any kind of judgmental narrative, let's say, about appropriation or participation. So for me, how I came to this image that's on the cover of my book, and anyone who has seen my book or seen the publicity for this book, it's an image taken by Sang-Kwang Chee in 1983 in London of Keith Haring painting the body of Bill T. Jones. And I chose this image because it's a really vibrant scene of participation to me. There are many gestural lines happening in terms of the art that's captured in this image. So I see the gestural line of Haring's painting, but I also see a kind of gestural line in Bill T. Jones's movement. So even though it's a still image, it has so much kind of movement and capacity in it. And it also has Sang-Kwang Chee's photographic gesture, which is his kind of beauty and handling of form.
Can you bring it closer, Bill?
So I chose this image because it's vibrant, and it opens the book as well, the scene of the body painting. And I do this by reading a video that I found in Bill T. Jones's archive that Arnie Zane, his lover and collaborator, took and recorded this event happening, and really think about the dynamics of exchange that are happening in this particular studio setting. And yes, the image for me calls to mind, the potential for the eroticization of the Black body, the fetishization or the production of a colonial gaze. But I pointedly try my hardest to demonstrate that closes down the image, and there's so much more happening here. It makes us have to think about the exchange in such a dynamic and complicated way. So it's an image that excites me, and an image that makes me feel a lot of different things. And that's how it ended up on the cover of the book, and why I start the book with this encounter, this scene of artistic exchange. So Bill, I'm wondering if you might provide a little context for this event, how it happened. And I know that you've read the introduction to the book. And so also I'm curious to hear how my particular kinds of readings or the way I negotiate these materials might miss a lot of what was actually kind of happening, both for you and for the others involved in this scene.
Well, congratulations. I've been wading out into more of the book. I think I see what you're going for. I'm struck in Josh's wonderful introduction, and in yours, the language. And first of all, Arnie and I never called each other my lover. You know, it's burdensome to me. We used to say a lover is a character in a Barbara Cartland novel. And we thought boyfriend was infantilizing. We said teenage girls have boyfriends. So you might wonder what we called. We call each other companions, partners. You know, it was. So that's one thing that just and I don't know if I. So what was going on with Keith? It was always a lark. It was we liked to play, and Keith was going places that people in the performing arts certainly were not going. There was a time, I don't know what exactly, but Keith was on the cover of, I remember that moment, he was on the cover of every art magazine, Art in America, Art Forum, I think there are 5 of them. And he was, there was cash around, and I had grown up with the good white liberals and all, and I had certainly, Arnie Zane was the first man I ever slept with, but we definitely went to the baths. And so I knew about the, how do you say, the eroticization of racial relationships. There's something, so he was going to, I can't even remember exactly. I do know I came up to his studio, his apartment on the corner of Houston and Broadway. And it was let's say it was a Saturday morning, always had magazines around. There was always people there, David Spada, people like that were around. There were always young guys, young Spanish guys, black guys, maybe here or there, a few porno magazines, whatever. It was, we were playing. And he showed me a magazine, a coffee table size magazine that had in it a picture of a very handsome Brazilian football player. And this Brazilian football player, as I remember, was from the waist up in one of the large vases of Keith's. I think it might have been collaboration with LA2. And I was remarking on how interesting it was, and we were laughing about the throwback to the 1960s, when body painting was something that you did when you got stoned out of your mind and you painted your bodies and so on. And Keith was saying, I'd like to do you. Or did I say I'd like to do, I don't remember exactly, but that was the way it was. And so we made this plan to meet in London. I believe my company was performing at Dance Umbrella, or Arnie and I were at Dance Umbrella. It's all vague now. And it was a Saturday morning that we did it. And Kwang Chi, as you know, was documenting all the time. Arnie had a brand new camera, which he was very, very proud of, the latest version of a portable camera, because we come from the era when the video cameras were so bulky and the batteries and all. I remember in State University, up at the Experimental Television Center in Binghamton, when they would allow us to take these cameras out, which were always breaking down. The batteries were so big you had to pull them in a wagon behind you. But now here we were, years had gone by, and we could afford to have a little handheld high definition, I don't know if we called it high definition camera. So Arnie was there. I don't think that Keith much cared what was going on. He knew that Kwang was going to be capturing it. Keith's job was, when he was in front of a surface, he was painting it. Jim Carroll at Kutztown University, as you know, that's where Keith comes from, an artist and art teacher, art historian, said, before I met Keith, he said, oh, this guy is like, he's got an eye like, you know how Picasso can like see a wall and then he could just fill it without, I think you mentioned this even in the book, that he had this kind of uncanny way of seeing the whole drawing and without going back and correcting anything. So it was exciting. And he was planning to do my body, and I think he was going to do the Robert Fraser Gallery. He would attack these huge spaces on site and do it. And I was, so it was kind of a party. And we did, as you write in your book, it took about 4.5 hours to do. Arnie was photographing. Arnie was making the film, and Kwang Chi was doing the photography, and Kwang Chi said, Bill, flatten out the shapes. I know for years, this is interesting. He said, flatten out the shapes. I know that this quote, as some nasty critics used to say, our style was cookie cutter choreography. We were very interested in things being ironically hierarchical. What am I looking for? Pardon? Heretical, sorry. We were very conscious of that. Matter of fact, when I approached Keith at the insistence of my friend Bill Katz, I went to Kutztown. We were being invited to this program that had a lot of downtown choreographer types. I know Tricia had been there. Probably Von Rayner. I don't know, people like that had been there. And Arnie and I were there. And Jim Carroll was telling us about this friend of his, one of his former students, did you say? Who was a great artist, and that we really should meet him. And he showed me, did he show me, or was it Keith's childhood friend, Kermit Oswald, who was still living there, and showed me these Xeroxes of Keith taking apart this Mickey Mouse, which is something I haven't read deeply enough in the book, but I was thinking, I know the baby line attracted your eye and the neo-primitivism, but what about Walt Disney? Keith told me once, I said, well, what are you going for? He said, I want to be like, they're my two idols, Andy Warhol and Walt Disney. He said, I want to be a household word. So anyways, Keith was doing a lot in London, and we were with him one afternoon, and at the end of the day, he happens to casually mention, oh, the press is coming. And, hey, we just roll with it. Here I am completely naked. Talk about the colonialized gaze, if you will. The doors open, and all of these tabloid photographers, the British, by any chance? They will be in your face. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to explain this without falling into the trap of our era, trying to gotcha. Here I am, the only naked person in the room, and I am this black man, covered from head to toe with this. And these guys start taking photos and making cracks. Hey, you lost your trousers. Where's your trousers? The next day in the paper, completely naked, little pictures of me. But, it was the way it was, and we rolled with it. And for Keith, because Keith was in there with black and brown people, and he was not trying to be a hipster. He didn't affect a black slang or anything like that. He was, as a matter of fact, he looked like the opposite. He was such a geek. Yeah. He embraced him. We embraced him. So is that what you mean by the background of it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is the story here? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you relate to the kind of life of the image since that event?
Mm-hmm. Well, Keith immediately did posters, postcards, and T-shirts, and I was very proud of them all. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a beautiful graphic image. It's a pity that I think maybe some of the people in your audience maybe have seen it, but the way that I was moving in it with the flashing of Kwang Chi's camera and all, and music playing, it was kind of exciting. I felt like I was in Blow Up, or was it David Bailey in Barushka? And it was, and these guys are all around. It was quite a party, How did I feel? Keith was, he had his pop shop opened. I was one of those images, one of the things he was selling in that pop shop. And Keith was honorable. He told me once he wanted to have a relationship with Arnie and my company, like Trisha Brown had with Robert Rauschenberg. He wanted to be able to give us a work every year that we could sell for fundraising. I trusted the man, and he never betrayed me. As I told you and Josh the other day, Keith was very generous. Arnie grew sick. The upstairs, we were working on it, and we knew we were going to need a restroom upstairs in this very house. And he gave me the money to buy a sink, toilet, and a bathtub, just ripped off dollar bills. So no, that I don't know how much money was ever made from them. But in some ways, I felt that it was ultimately not about the money between Keith and I. He was my friend.
So maybe to talk, so I know that there's this body painting event, but you had worked with Keith prior to this in the kind of realm of dance. And maybe we could.
And you know, I wasn't the first one. Keith had actually had done in collaborations with my friend Melissa Finley. And which is, if you know Melissa's work, is extremely formal and extremely minimal. And I think that they probably knew each other from where they were. I think he lived upstairs or downstairs from her, somewhere in the village. So there was a precedent in his life for that, for having worked with dancers. Keith and I did something called, it was an evening at the kitchen of I think it was called Duets and Solos. And he and I did a piece called Long Distance, I believe it was called. And it was just me dressed in black with, tellingly, a single white line down the center of my face. Why? Considering that Keith had appropriated an Africanist line, what was I doing? I was painting on my black face with a white line because I thought it was distinctively, somehow or other, I felt transformed and I felt blacker, even blacker. And, you know, you had to realize that Soho at that time, the Guerrilla Girls had to remind them that they had a problem with representation of women. But, you know, Soho didn't know that it was like, you know how John Lennon said in one of his Working Class Heroes, race, classless and free. You know, the counterculture, like rock musicians thought, you know, hey, we don't have a problem. Rolling Stones were a blues band, right, man? You read Keith Richards' book, and he loves to brag about how he would go to this particular place and have a flirtation with these black girls. It was like you know, we're cool with race. There's nothing like that. So Keith, when I did that, it was trying to underline something that would separate me from that perception that the kitchen crowd had. Very seldom integrated audiences. I mean, if you count on one hand, George Lewis, Douglas Ewart. Did BB ever perform there? BB was with Nina Weiner at that time. I don't know if they ever performed there. Who are the other black people that performed at the kitchen? So suddenly to draw attention to something, which we find very troubling now, that black people have to let white people know, I am not impressed when you say, I don't see your race. I was, every time I was performing or dancing, they knew that I was performing and dancing as a black person. But the style of the dancing, the context of it, was saying, and yet I'm of your tribe. Keith came in and he painted on the back wall. It's huge pieces of paper. He improvised it and I did a solo in silence. My friend Robert Longo, who was there probably with Gretchen Bender, they were remarking how stark it was, and the only sound was him dipping his brush, you know. And of course, everybody was competing with him. And I think that he was, at that point, Basquiat, Keith was probably more visible than Basquiat. They were both represented by Tony Shafrazi. They were friends. But it was something to be dancing like that, with that stripe, and being who I am at the kitchen. The other piece that we did was, I'm not sure if it was before or after the painting. I think it was after. Secret Pastures, I believe, came afterwards. I could be wrong. At the Brooklyn Academy of Music. It was a work that I remember Arnie and I sitting here in this very house and saying, we want to do something in quasi-fiction. And it should be tongue-in-cheek. It should be like, oh, it should be like a soap opera, like Secret Storm. Well, we're gonna call ours Secret Pastures. And we had a group of downtown cool people like Peter Gordon, Love of Life Orchestra, Marcel Fivier, and depending on point of view, the devil, because at that point people were still a little confused if they were still in the 60s, where you were not supposed to be concerned about fashion and so on. There was people still wearing Birkenstocks. And then there were other people who had haircuts, blow dry, died. He had our whole, when we did the Secret Pastures, we had a chorus of other dancers, and it looked like a fashion show because it was all designed by Willie Smith. And for those of your audience who are interested, Willie Smith was the designer, the fashion designer, and should I say the Black fashion designer of his era, because those things were important at that time. There weren't that many around, right? So Willie Smith was a marriage that was, what was his name? Stephen Reichardt, working with the Next Wave people. They put together these teams of artists collaborating, and Secret Pastures came out of that. So Keith hand painted these panels. He hand painted this tent. You know, it was going to be about an exhibition. I'm not even thinking very well tonight. That it was going to be.
So would it be helpful to watch the clips of the long distance and the short clip of Secret Pastures now?
Oh,
and then
okay.
we can
All right.
talk about it. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Josh, would you mind playing those?
So I'm going to play the clip of long distance first. Would you like me to play the next clip?
Yeah.
I'm dying to know what the professor that you are and the analysis that you've written this book. So is that racialized? Is that eroticized? Is that a colonial focus going on in that?
Well, I would say that, yes, my temptation would be to read it as such, but yet understanding that there's so much more going on. I'm just so drawn in energetically in that exchange between your two bodies, but the kind of, like, there's two different kinds of lines interacting with each other. Haring's line and the kind of lines that you're producing gesturally. And I'm just, I'm not a dance scholar, but I just sort of feel it in a way. And I feel this kind of intensity between these two bodies. And what I'm really curious, if that's all you did at one time, improvisation?
No, we did, I think there were 4 performances at the kitchen. I think he did. I'm not sure. There was a bunch of them. We did 4 of them at least. But I guess what I'm trying to understand is what is if you had seen Trisha Brown and, let's say, Lamont Young.
Okay.
I'm trying to Trisha Brown and Judy Pfaff, somebody like that, in a performance, and the two of them, 2 women. One woman is doing her visual art and the other woman is dancing. I mean, I'm not sure. I think we can't help it at racialized in this country. But this is what, if there was any bone to pick with your generation of scholars, is that what is that? What's racialized about it? I've told you even how I felt about my body in the white avant-garde. Literally, I felt black on stage, you know, and yet very few people can understand what you mean. I felt black. So that's why I'm curious to know, if you look at that, what is that? Is something racialized going on in that? Well, it's about two people. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, this is something that I think about a lot when I'm confronting work that supposedly kind of, you know, race neutral casting, or all the kind of terms that they have where it doesn't matter what sort of race somebody is when they take on a part. It's very hard for me not to kind of see a body that has a script attached to it, that has historical meaning attached to it, and not read race into it and like forget it, because it does have a signifying power, you know. So I'm going to be drawn into a scene and think about your blackness in relation to Haring, and then hearing you talk about the kitchen, to think about your blackness in relation to that space, that historical moment as well.
It was a whole art world.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. Well, yes, yeah, but I can't help but think about those dynamics, or want to know more about those dynamics and more about that experience and what was happening in this moment when you're moving in relation to whiteness, you know.
Well, and I thank you for that. You know, we've been washed upon this shore of time, and my friends are all dead. They're gone. The time is no longer there. And so what we were doing was so like fresh and crisp and daring, and you know, we were being gay in public. We were actually, I was being, Keith allowed me to be black in public, but at the same time, you were accepted into the avant-garde that didn't know that it had a race, right? So I wonder, this is, because, you know, I think that sometimes my problem, at least maybe before the last 10 years or so, I thought I had a problem. Bill, you and your racial looking. That was not cool, probably 5 years ago, to look at a room full of people and count the black people in it. I always did it. And I thought it was something that you have to live through and live down so you could be a free person. Because after all, art was supposed to make us free. So to hear you say that you can't help but put on what we used to call racialized glasses is it's a vindication of something. No, I was not crazy or lacking something, but it's also angering that it took the world this fucking long to understand what it meant. And now someone's writing a treatise about it, and I had to live through it. But thank you for your work. And shall we see Secret Pastors?
Yeah.
That hat, it's on. That hat, it stays on. What the fuck?
So can I just say that I really, I've seen this a few times all the way through this recording, and I really love that that first duet you have with Arnie. It's really.
That's all you like. That's all you like.
No. I'm saying I really love it though. It's like an amazing moment of like.
And
like,
Marcia Siegel, who had seen us do the duets at the kitchen and the duets at the old DTW and so on, she wrote something that she never published, really, and she gave it to me at Arnie's memorial about a neo-primitive duet. They had taken their downtown postmodern formalism and fashioned it into a metaphor for something that had to do, and I think she probably mentioned race, because Arnie plays the mad professor and I am his fabricated man, which was always something that was over us all the time. Arnie is this little pushy Jew who is controlling Bill. So we actually souped it up and even made me a big a lumpen Gollum type character. And everyone got into that. And he is the Mad Hat professor, who I ultimately, did I kill him at the end? Or, no, I think I kill him. And everyone sails away and leaves me alone on the island, Caliban type character. So, yeah, I mean, when I protest about your book, trying to talk about these things, I think you're touching a sore place. You're touching a guilty place, because it was outrageous to be playing with this stuff. I mean, Carol Walker, we understand now with her being able to mine the antebellum South, and with all of its sexual perversity, with big lips and ever procreating black mammies and libidinous white owners and sadomasochism and all. Well, we were just sort of folding it into, it was a vocabulary that, I don't know, maybe we didn't understand, or maybe we didn't give a damn. Maybe we thought art was so, you know, our teachers are like Jack Smith. You know, if you know, not literally teachers, but the freedom, what it meant to be a gay artist, what it meant to be. And do you know who Patrick Kelly is? Patrick Kelly, you should know, and if your viewers, they should know, he was a designer, black man from Vicksburg, Mississippi, determined to make his mark in Paris. And he went to Paris. What was he, the first black, first man?
Black in the fashion.
First, could you say it, please?
He was the first it was the first American designer accepted by the Paris Fashion Corporation to do his shows at the Louvre. And he had a career as part of that from 85 to 90 when he died. He was
championed by Yves Saint Laurent, Pierre Berger. The Parisians loved it. And Patrick did this thing. He dressed in big baggy overalls. Some people say it was a precursor to hip hop fashion, and black memorabilia. Literally, long before Carol Walker got there, Patrick was making clothes that had black baby dolls and gollywogs and so on. So it was in the air. I didn't know Patrick at the time, but I knew of him. And he was a companion of the man that I'm now married to. So that's why I see your book and I understand the scholarship and what you're trying to, you say you're in love with Keith and so on. But, you know, we were the avant-garde around issues of race and what have you. We were mixing it up because we believed in freedom. Of course, I took a lot of shit from that, being called a race traitor. Right? Well, first of all, if you're going to be working with a small Italian Jewish man and everyone knows that you're actually also companions, that's already suspect. What's wrong with you, brother? What's wrong with you? Right? But we thought artists are perverse. They're supposed to be perverse. I'm talking a lot.
Well, I mean, I want to say something that in trying to work through some of these issues, it is that, like, I don't want to have the right reading of the time. I mean, that's not at all. I mean, I really understand that, like, there's also something at stake in taking the way that people talk about what happened and then incorporating it into the academic argument of this book. And you know, particularly like when I look at Grace Jones, for instance, like, she kind of lets me have it in my own argument. Like it's sort of like I have so much anger, let's say, towards Jean-Paul Goude when I read Jungle Fever. It just made my blood boil. And then she turns my own judgment on its head with her elaboration of that encounter and the kinds of experimentation that they're doing. So it is.
And you know, Ricardo, respect, my brother, respect. You are a first-rate scholar, and I believe you also do a thing which is important to me. You lead with your heart. You talk about your love for it and the questions that you had. You even describe it as obsessions and so on. So already I'm inclined to let you in. But I think what we're putting our finger on right now is, I used to say, and I don't know, I don't say it so much anymore, there's a natural tension between academia and artists.
Right.
There should be. Artists should always be in the face of academics saying, you think you can capture this butterfly? But then again, I'm a person who believes in thinking, and I love history. And so we need you for history and your analysis, I suppose. You know, yeah. Deborah Jowett described this as the first modern dance influenced by MTV. Can you imagine? We were kind of proud of that. You know, oh my God, how commercial, how slick. And you're wearing spandex, you know, and the colors are so garish and all. Where was all this piety coming from? You know, I don't think the avant-garde knew it had opinions like that. It, as always is the case, somebody has to do something, and then the gatekeepers began to push back, and a lot of them were savaging us in the press, you know, or they couldn't understand what we were doing, which alienates artists even more, pushes them away, and some of us break. So I thank you, my brother. I thank you for what you have attempted to do in this book, but I want you to, I want to make sure that you have respect for the God and the goddess. You cannot analyze it, what it is. So yeah, the appropriation argument that we're having right now is a good argument to have. But if the artists are good, they are going to just dance away from all of that stuff. They have to, from left or from right.
So I mean, we've talked a little bit about, you know, these shifts in racial consciousness that you mentioned, you know, and you're talking, I think earlier you said maybe in the last 5 years or last 10 years. I'm curious what it's like to continue producing so much work for so long, and how that shapes your company or the kinds of artistic practice that you're engaged in now, or how it's shifted over the years.
Have I stayed too long at the fair? That was Arnie's favorite song. As a matter of fact, one day he was leaving rehearsal. He was dramatic like that. He's going to a doctor's appointment. And I remember him stopping at the door, the rest of us, and he sang a la Barbra Streisand, have I stayed too long at the fair? So I'm talking to you as a gay man to a gay man, right? What was that about that he thought that so it was beautifully done, but a bit schmaltzy. And he was actually talking about his very life. From that moment he did that, he was probably dead within the year. So you ask me, what's it like? Sometimes I feel like that. I feel like Arnie at the door, you know? How was I allowed to survive? And do I really want to keep doing this? What is this? You know, hot young artists come up and everybody, they're making companies and they want to, well, why do you want to do that? Oh, they believe in beauty. I see. Do you still believe in beauty, Bill? On my table, I have Don Quixote, the third book of Mr. Wallace on Michelangelo, a book by Matthew Christ has given me of poetry, and The Unknown Craftsman by Mr. Morse. It's about Japan. So we live in a very aestheticized household. So you ask me, what's it like? I quote Georgie O'Keeffe when people say, well, you had some hard years then, Mr. O'Keeffe. You spent a couple of winters alone in New Mexico. How did you keep going? And she said, well, out of spite. How does that play in our history? That he kept going out of spite. And people, the dancers come and go, and this was the child that Arnie and I had. You know, and I say that I'll be damned if we will be eunuchs. No, we didn't make babies, but we made something else that continues to grow. That's one answer to your question.
Right, yeah.
And I am still trying to ask certain questions of myself about form. No, I don't have to make works that are overtly about race right now. I think that I have earned the privilege to make works about my particular self. Deep Blue Sea that I'm working on right now is about the loneliness of being in the avant-garde. But it's couched in the story of Pip and Melville's Pip in Moby Dick, the little black boy who gets lost bobbing in the ocean. No, I don't want anybody feeling sorry for me, but I want you to know what I feel. And when I see my dancer, a dancer like Wei Wong or Vincent Fraley, really open up and move, and I turn my eyes to wherever you turn your eyes when you speak to the dead, and I say to Arnie, you wouldn't believe it. Look how beautiful they are. We remember a time when we thought if they were people of color, they were all with Mr. Ailey. And if they were not, the others are with Merce Cunningham, or the groovy ones are with Trisha. And the people that you don't have a strong enough technique. You're faking it. You have imposter syndrome. Arnie never felt he had imposter syndrome. I did. So you're asking me why? How is it like? Some of those wounds never heal. Some of those wounds never heal. And others, it is, God damn it, I will, you know how they say, before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave, you know? I will not let those sons of bitches tell me that my life was for naught, and that my ideas of beauty, my ideas of form, my ideas of what goes on the stage are as valid as anyone's. And as a matter of fact, I can even lead discussions and have. Is that answer to your question? How has it been to keep going?
Yeah.
We're having a real-time conversation, aren't we?
Yeah. I want to say, and I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking about the kinds of work that you do, but also your generosity and the gift that you give. One of the most moving experiences that I had was I was invited to a rehearsal when you were working with the Princeton dance students.
Interesting.
It was so amazing. I mean, it was just so amazing to see the generosity, and see you work through this movement again and again with them. It was just a really, it's really remarkable, and it's really stuck with me, you know.
You know, there's one thing about the fragility of our era, is that, you know, I was never around when Miss Graham, if you spend a day at the beach and you came in and she said, you get out of here until you lose that tan line. You can't be on Martha Graham's stage, you know. Or when Paul Taylor, these things I heard from people in the company, if the sideburns were too long, you know, you'd be ridiculed. Get out of this fucking room, you know. They were allowed to be dragons. And now, you know, when I'm like, you saw me, hopefully it was a good day, but I can be very intense. Trying to get people to crack open that place where they hurt, where they think, and I know if I know there's a dancer out there who talks about mental health all the time, right? And we got to be more careful about dancers' mental health. You know what? Life is a mental health problem. Artists, I think, and this is me going off right now, I do think artists have got to live in the fire, but that's not a politically correct position anymore. So that is also going on. How can I find the fervor of my mother's prayers, right? How can I find that fervor in formalism, in the way that a movement is done, in the way the commitment that you have to give to a line, or just the outpour of energy? And those things are all going at play when I'm coaching young performers. Now, are my goals their goals? I don't know, but in a way, mentorship says it doesn't even matter, does it? Once upon a time, people came to an older artist to learn from them, not for the older artist to take care of them. Have I stayed too long at the fair? You know? And then you've got my youthful butt on the front of your book, right? With Keith Haring looking like Poindexter or somebody from a cartoon of a white boy, right? With a paintbrush. And I'm standing there in my black body, he's just painting on it, and he's pacing around me, right? Well, and this too is what this career has been. Do I have the guts to do anything like that anymore? do I have the desire to be generous like that anymore? That is a spiritual struggle for me right now.
Well, I thank you for being generous this evening and engaging in this conversation. Maybe perhaps we should open it up for questions at this point.
Can't wait.
Great. So I'll just be reading the questions out of the chat. And so those of you who are watching, if you're interested in asking a question, feel free to drop it into the chat bar now. But we do have a question from Adrian Loving, who asked, did Bill and Keith consider doing a piece or performing together at the Paradise Garage? What was your engagement with the club culture?
Keith was my invitation to club culture, but quite frankly, I was never a disco baby. I was never interested in it. I was interested in the beauty and the sex. I remember being at the Palladium on the opening night when Madonna was singing, I believe she was singing Like a Virgin in public for the first time. And Keith said to me, oh, you know, Andy says she's going to be bigger than anything. And I said, are you kidding with that voice? He said, you just wait. Or being at Paradise Garage and having Halston and Linda Evans of Dynasty walk through. Oh my God, real stars here. And they're like, with all the Puerto Rican boys and the black kids and the drag queens and all. And it was like, that was Keith's world. But it was not our world. You know, we didn't really, we weren't there. So no, then to do it, we did do a piece, not Keith and I, but we did do a piece, the company did a piece at Area. For those old enough to remember, as you walked into Area, it was a series of windows with different vivant, tableau vivant on both sides. And sometimes a muscle man or a muscle woman or somebody doing something sexual, and the company was in that milieu as well. But no, Keith and I never performed in the clubs. I only danced with Keith once or twice. I can't even remember. He loved hip hop and all, but to see Keith dance, Keith was not a cool dancer at all. He was a nerd, you know, which is sort of endearing. No, we didn't dance at that. No. So we tried to bring that feeling to Secret Pastures on the band stage.
Well, maybe I'll choose my authority as the moderator to ask you a question about Secret Pastures, which watching the video, I was just really struck by your use of the stage, like the kind of simultaneity of action going on, where something is centralized and then there's someone moving in and someone moving in and out. And it seemed to have this echo for me, Ricardo, of like the way you describe Haring's paintings as having like so much going on. There's no central focal moment. And I wondered if if you could speak more to the use of space in Secret Pastures, like the.
Are you talking about all over composition as Cy Twombly would have inherited from Jackson Pollock?
Yes, I would love to hear about all over composition. If you all have thoughts or feelings about it, or where that takes your mind. Well,
Ricardo, I think it was an invitation for you as an art historian to analyze the spatial use. I'm glad you're laughing, because I was very aware of Balanchine. And you saw even there amid that madness, sometimes there's an organized architecture that spills across the stage. Arnie Zane was doing what Arnie wanted to do. That was Arnie with the giant guitar, the radios, the Garden of Radio Delights is what that scene was called. We were aware of all of these things, and we wanted to make good art, but it had to be wild. It had to be falling apart. It had to be, I remember Stephen Petronio, Stephen hears about this. When we were working out in Baltimore, and he was like with the same company, but he was making a piece and I was making a piece, and he said, you know, I'm interested in everything that's obsessive. That was the ethos of the time. Now, or of course, I think Arnie might have already been dead, so it was a little later. So I'm interested in everything that's obsessive. and we were doing cocaine, and we were high, and we were going to live forever, even though we could see people were dying. Maybe that made us live more wildly. So I don't know if it's quite as disorganized as you think. Everything you saw there, Bill was allowed to improvise, Arnie is improvising, but everything else is choreographed. But it had to feel as if it were coming off the walls in a disco.
I think it gets, I'll hold my comments, but I really respond to that. There is a question from Sarah Lobel. In long distance, was any part of your choreography improvised? And
a lot of it was improvised, but I don't know if you noticed, but there are certain motifs that are almost like modalities I moved through. The rond de jambes to the back, what was doing in the front, this sort of port de bras, I believe it's in 5th position, that punctuates the place near Keith. What happens downstage, the stop and wiggle the hips. So it was all very free, but there were these modalities which were spatial that I was moving through. And that was my modus operandi.
Was Haring's painting, were they improvised, or would he plan his pictures in advance?
I don't think Keith planned his pictures. No, what came out of him came out of him. And to this day, I didn't live with those paintings very long because they were one night, he rolled them up, and it was only at the end of his life that we were asking, where are those paintings? I think I saw one of them, the 2 snakes coming together. Could have been 2 dicks, because he often did that. He made a birthday piece for me with me overdoing a movement from one of the solos, and it was an is this the one? But I'm bent over, but out of my crotch comes this impossibly long dick that has a snake at the end. I believe that's what, so it was a motif of his. And so he had a vocabulary that he would roll out and put together in different ways. And Keith was also, particularly toward the end of his life, when he was getting so much heat about the art being not deep enough, but he was trying to find a way out as well as he was getting sicker and sicker. And I don't know if you've seen the collaborations with Andy Warhol. I'm sure you have, Ricardo, right? But it was, for many of us, it felt like Keith was really battling with himself to find another level of acceptance in the art world. But no, I think he was improvising all the time, and he was fantastic at it. He really was.
I mean, I think it's the improvisational that is his kind of virtuosity, that ability to scale up any surface and just go at it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. God, I hope you guys, you're both pretty and young. I hope you get to live long enough to have a moment like I'm having now talking to you. You're nice guys, and you're very sure about your intellect, and you've been well educated and so on. And then somebody now do something that's going to really make almost everybody around you upset. They're going to declare you without talent, crass, craven, and then keep living. And then keep living, and suddenly you'll be sitting talking to 2 handsome guys one night. Oh, it looks so easy.
Oh, but Bill, academic confidence is the virtuosic performance of all times. I mean, crumbling imposter syndrome inside of all of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
you get to publish it in books. You get, do you know what David White said to, because we had performed at the Kitchen. We famously made those early duets, Arnie and I, but when they saw what Secret Pastures, it was scandal. And he said, well, why was Arnie madcapping around on stage like that? Madcapping around on stage like that? He was doing a character. It was so over the top. What's with you guys? Trying to get attention? Yeah, I guess. but what else was it? What else was it?
Well, maybe to this question of like academics and art and their engagement, Ben Totera asked a question about you know, how you feel, Bill, like having your work being written about in this moment, and Ricardo, what it's like to speak to an artist whose work you've written about, and Christine Balance, kind of building on Ben's question, asked, you know, building and fine-tuning on that, I wonder how both of you feel about having this conversation in this year, in this historical moment. Is there something particular about the times that you're feeling in relationship to the conversation we're having tonight?
Ricardo, is that a question for Ricardo?
It's for both of you, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say just in general, I think there's always some, you know, it's intimidating to speak to people that you translate as subjects in your criticism, and but it's also, you know, I always understand the kind of limits of that project, and so it's always also very exciting to kind of hear a different sort of idea or take on the thing that you spend so much time analyzing. And I think that in terms of, and certainly Bill, again, it's funny that you think of us as confident, because it's actually kind of not that at all. I'm always kind of ready to be undermined in whatever my analysis is. And I think that I performed that quite a bit in this book project. But I think in this moment now, it's an honor. It's amazing to be able to have this conversation. But I think that it's like there's a lot going on in this world right now that's very difficult to kind of pull. I mean, I don't know. I mean, sometimes I think why people, because people have asked in terms of the book, like, oh, this seems like it's coming out at a really good moment. And I'm like, why is my story about Keith Haring so great right now in light of what's going on? I mean, I have a hard time understanding that. I mean, I think that there are resonances we can see when we look at Keith Haring, that, you know, the issues around, or questions of what it means to be a white ally in the 80s, when he's thinking about through Michael Stewart's murder by the police officer, certainly there's resonance there, and you see that like there's not a lot has changed in a lot of ways. We're just seeing it in different kinds of media form, and we have to see it again and again and again. But I feel, you know, it's a hard moment. I feel depleted in a lot of ways. But I do feel energized looking at this artwork and talking about the kinds of movements that you made, Bill, and the kinds of your presence and the way you persist is really inspiring. But in terms of, there's just so much in the world that is.
Who asked that question? I wonder what it was a woman, right? What do they mean at this moment? They mean Black Lives Matter? They mean defund the police? They mean the pandemic? They mean, what do they mean this moment?
The only clarification that Christine gave was thinking about New York specifically in 2020.
Yeah, well, Christine, you know, some of us have grown up on a racial battlefield. And as a matter of fact, we tried to, at Woodstock, we tried to numb it away. We tried to, in the baths, we tried to, you know, so people, this is what makes me cynical sometimes about what is different about the Black Lives Matter protests. People say it's different. Look at the people in the street. They're young, they're multiracial. This is different than the 1960s. This is different. And we shall see how different it is. We shall see how different it is if you know who wins the next election. And is it true that there have been polls that say around the time of the killing of George Floyd that the America, and I take that to be white America, was 70% in favor of the protest. And now it is down to the high 40s. What happened in a couple of months? You know, so at this moment, what are we talking about? Some of us fully expect that it will always feel like an apartheid state, because it always has. And there will always be privileges rooted in race, because it always has. So I don't know, the moment is not that different. It's not that different. And as I said to my dancers around these protests, I said, you all know that old disco song, burn, baby, burn. And that is a bastardization of people in Newark and around the country rioting, burning, and say, burn, baby, burn, baby. That was the real shit. And then it became a pop song within a few short years. So, you know, as my mother used to say, live on, just keep on living and you will understand, right? So, yeah, I don't know what this moment really is.
Well, I will, just to give Christine her due, since I mentioned her by name, she did also say Black Lives Matter, but she's also wondering your thoughts on how artists are surviving in the kind of pandemic moment, especially I think in the performing arts. And you know, Ricardo, you're a professor with students who are artists, and maybe you have some thoughts about that as well.
We're talking, I'm sorry, could you repeat what
I think it was a question just about like your sense about how artists are getting along at this moment in time in terms of the pandemic. So she was thinking about, I'm just bringing this up, but maybe I could also ask more questions and we could factor that in to some answers going forward.
But I think there was also a question about the you know, dealing with the HIV, right? And this different moment or the trauma of HIV, I think, was also embedded in Christine's clarification. Is that right? Maybe I'm confusing things that are flying up in the chat.
Oh, I see. Oh, so the pandemic is also reflecting or mirroring the AIDS crisis, right? Yeah. Well, could I take up the economic one? How artists are surviving. There was a romance once that artists had a lot of, and you know, I used to wickedly, as a child of the underclasses, used to say that the avant-garde was populated by refugees from the middle classes. And this was all tongue-in-cheek, refugees. People came to New York to be poor, came to New York to have firsthand experience of what it means to create in a garret, which was a trope from the 19th century. And many people of color, they thought that's their romance. That's the romance of white people, you know, because we've been trying to get out from underneath this for a long time. So I think something happened in the 1980s where there was a lot of money around. And artists, particularly visual artists, were making money. Their work had value. Now, I don't think it was ever in the performing arts the case. Something happened with expectations of a lot of young artists that they were supposed to have a middle-class life. Someone was just supposed to provide it for them. And then I think it's hard as hell right now. It's hard as hell. And I think part of the pain of that is the expectation that it's supposed to be easier. That you should be, quote, I hear this a lot, I should be valued, right? And a value, I guess, turns into dollars. And I should be taken care of. I should be taken into consideration of the whole ecology of art production. You know, they never did. And I don't know if in the commercial world, the performers were called the talent. You know, keep the talent over there, the producers over here. And now everybody wants equity. We demand equity. And I say, you know, your work was never really that valued anyways in the culture. What makes you think that the culture owes you anything? And it made that attitude, and I apologize if I offend anyone, but that attitude was what made people like Arnie and I very aggressive. We wanted it all. We wanted to make money. We wanted to have nice things and all. And yet we wanted to be outlaws. And because some people were doing it. So about how it is for artists right now, and as for the pandemic, you know, I say to myself when I think about the fact that we were told to use condoms, and there was a good, and most people in the society, this did not apply to them. I don't think the straight people changed their behavior very much, you know, because if you weren't sleeping with men, then you were clean. But they were saying we were all supposed to be wearing condoms. People ignored that. Let's see how it shakes down now in terms of the pandemic. Has it gotten real for a critical mass of people that it's truly going to change behavior? So those are two areas that I think maybe reflect on Christine's question. Christine, I respect, if I don't mean to be disrespectful of what you're saying, but I'm really leading with my heart right now.
Let me maybe raise a question that comes from Engbeng Lim that seems to address both of your projects a little bit. Engbeng Lim writes, "Hi, Bill. I'm your long-lost dramaturg from the Bacchae production in Davis, California.
Engbeng, good to hear from you. Yes.
You're as acutely astute and intellectually alive as I encountered in 1999. I love your notes on perverse erotics and how accepting you were of their different registers between gay companionship, consummate artists who experiment with cultural appropriation, even in the gratuitous gaze of the British press as they re-signify your naked painted body, and as Haring's work with you became a product for sale on the one hand, but also a lifelong friendship on the other. I like the way you think through the searching layers of racial desire without valorizing it into power binaries. But what do you think of choreographers who are less thought out in their intercultural collaboration, whose vocabularies are more nativizing, say Jerome Bell and his relationship to Pichek Kunchun? The payoff is way less sexy.
Engbeng, you want me to step into the shit, man? What are you talking about? I can't criticize a colleague like that. I thank you very much. As I remember how smart you were, and it's so eloquently put. Yeah, you know, one thing that we had at that time was we had to have language. We had to learn how to talk. We had to learn that we were there. Our soft parts were revealed in the press. Arnie was one of the handful of people who came out as HIV positive. Yeah, so we had to find a way to talk about our lifestyle so that we didn't have to apologize. This is my eyes are not my enemy. This is my tongue is not my enemy. Now you point to your tits and you say, this is my desire is not my enemy. Then you point to your dick, you say, this is my dick is not my enemy. So we were finding strategies to push back. And to this day, that's what this verbiage that I'm using is a result of. How do you push back? And I don't know about nativizing, what that actually means. I think what I like about Jerome Bell is that he still believes in outrage. It can be tiresome sometimes. It can be tiresome, particularly if you're, here I sound like a racist, white middle-class person and you want to stir up the shit, you know? Some of us, just by walking in the street, we're already stirring up the shit. So I don't know what he means by nativizing. I respect Jerome Bell's intellectual punch. I would say, as I do about a number of people following in the wake of AIDS, I say, I wish you a great tragedy. I wish something comes along and knocks you flat on your ass so that you have got to have something else other than ambition and your intellect that makes you make the next thing. Now, that's what I wish for the smart people in the room. I wish you a great tragedy. You don't have to be alive. What makes you think, how do you earn your bread? How do you earn the carbon footprint? How do you earn the space you're taking up? Nobody can tell you. You've got to just be a fierce motherfucker. You got to be able to get out there and do this thing because you are alive now. I don't know. So, and if you can bring people along, like smart people like you guys, and they write books about it, that's good. But nobody will remember you. Most of us will be forgotten.
Ricardo, I wonder how you would answer some of that question if we kind of transposed it onto your work you've done with Haring, like this question of the power differentials not simply falling into binaries, but does it matter in the instance of like the different layers of kind of interracial collaboration in Haring's work that you read, whether it's like a black-white binary that he's looking at or kind of transgressing in some ways, or, you know, because you read it through, of course, Sang-Kwang Chi's work, you read it through many different artists and individuals that Haring came in contact with? Does it change based on, you know, questions of representation in that way?
I mean, I think that like there are different circumstances, whether it's a kind of intimate relationship or you're talking about work that's protected through something like copyright. So, you know, I'm thinking in relation to something like, you know, Haring working with LA2 and then LA2 not being formally recognized in a kind of legal way to ensure that he continues to see something benefits from the work as it circulates. You know, I don't know the terms of how those pieces were sold or whatever, but there are kinds of ways that racial difference plays out in a kind of material way. But then there are, you know, instances in which there are kind of issues in which maybe the person that Haring's collaborating with isn't cared for after the fact of the collaboration. And I think that something, when I think about Haring's negotiations and interactions with Black and Latin men, Latinx men, like I think of in a difference when I think of Bill and I think of Arnie, because when I see Bill and Arnie's work, I constantly see an exchange of care there that's elaborated again and again and again in their performance work. And so I don't know if that's answering the question, but these are things that I'm thinking of when you ask me that.
Mm-hmm. You know what I think is really interesting? I would encourage all of you that are listening to this. You've seen the new edition of the New York Review of Books? And there's a great article by Hari Kunzru, a man, I must admit I didn't know, an important novelist, English-born a person from India. And he writes called The Wages of Whiteness. And this is very clarifying around our moment right now where we're thinking, he says that he thinks a lot of the sort of consciousness raising right now with white people is almost like Protestantism, where you can rather than, you can find salvation by uplift. And therefore that's what all the anti-racism workshops are about. That's what all of it is, that you can actually be made pure if you only would admit that I am a sinner. I am a sinner and fall down, and then you will be able to clean through. And I can't even, I'm saying it's a great clarifying argument for those of us who are trying to understand this desire for purity, this desire for, I don't want to be a racist. Help me, I don't want to be. And it ends this way, and I'm saying this for we say Black and brown people, because I wonder, Engbang is, I believe, your ethnicity is I believe, an ethnic Chinese, right? What happens to you guys in this whole discussion? There's something, and he says, if whiteness is just a story about sin and salvation, then it becomes a metaphysical condition outside history. One of the bleakest recent books about race is Frank Wilderson's Afro-Pessimism. Quote, Blacks are not human subjects, right, Wilkerson. They are instead structurally inert props, implements for the execution of white and non-Black fantasies and sadomasochistic pleasures. This ontological commitment is not to non-being is, as Wilderson's title indicates, the counsel of despair. If Blackness is necessary as the inferior pole to an eternal, immutable dyad, nothing can ever change. And where does that leave the rest of us non-Black people of color? I'm looking at you Asians out there, rendered invisible in this schema. Are we just subaltern tormentors as we are for Wilderson? For those who find this answer unacceptable, race cannot be everything, at least not in this absolute metaphysical sense, nor can it be nothing. The indecent haste with which commentators rush to praise America as a post-racial society after the election of Barack Obama drew a lot of hollow laughter at the time. The joke has only worn thinner. So how are you Asians feeling about all this? Blacks get all the attention. You get racialized? Is somebody drawing on your bodies?
I mean, I think, Bill, this speaks to something about the question that I keep getting asked about the book, is to make a kind of programmatic call in terms of what Haring was doing. And I think we're in a moment where people want a kind of programmatic way of dealing with their racism. So that, like, give me the call, give me the judgment that's going to make me behave appropriately around race. And it's being kind of reduced into these kind of black-white binaries. Some of the complications aren't visible. So I think that that's kind of the moment in which we're in. And I think it's become now a capital project where the people are benefiting from those kinds of trainings and that kind of logic too. So it's fine that we're in this moment.
And I just don't want people to forget how dangerous art's supposed to be. You know, I know that Clyde Barnes referred to Arnie and I in one review as egghead choreographers. They were big with the downtown intellectual crowd, but the work is nothing. Egghead. In other words, I don't think that he understood what the stakes were. And do we understand what the stakes are? What do you mean by freedom? Freedom of expression. And another one, what would you die for? I know people say, oh, well, what would you live for? I'm saying, what would you die for? You people define yourself as artists. And what makes you tremble? Are you still trembling in the face of not you, Ricardo, I know what you're trying to say, but are people out there still trying to be correct? Are they still trying to be correct? And that's what this late in our conversation, that's what I feel, the emotion begins to rise, and it is unaccountable. That's where the art's got to come from. That's what we need to do next. I know the protests and all and legalizing so on, but do you really love each other? What does it mean to love? Is a radical thing. Can you love somebody even though you have naughty fantasies about their black booty? Can you really love somebody even though you have naughty fantasies about that big black dick or that nice blonde head of hair? I mean, can you really love that human being even with your fantasies intact and not apologize for them? Can you be free? Some of us still trying.
Well, I want to be mindful that it is 9:30, so if there's any kind of concluding remarks you have, you're welcome to it, although I kind of want to just take us out with your remarks, Bill.
Yeah.
Walk, walk, don't you get weary. Walk, walk, don't you get weary. Walk, walk, don't you get weary. That's slaves coming home from the fields, working from dawn until fucking nightfall, going home, and they know that the next day they're going to do the same thing again. Can you pick up that mantle? Everybody listening right now, what does it mean for you to walk that walk in your art, in the way you talk, in your belief? And can you love? Now, let me get off the soapbox. Ricardo, respect my brother.
Thank you, Bill.
Book. Yes, thank you, Josh. Thank you, Janet. Thank you, all the people who made this possible. And now I will retreat and have a drink. Good night.